SWS came into existence, it erupted. It didn't come into existence. It wasn't planned. I think it was a result of the politics of the times and the youngsters' restlessness, and the high school wasn't serving its purpose as it should have been, and kids were looking and searching for something. And there were a group of adults who also were looking for the same thing. So because there was disorder and tension and upset, we were looking for some way to find an alternative to what a regular school is. The purpose of the school was to provide a place, an environment for the kids where they would feel connected and not want to leave school. There was the beginning of a period with lots of dropouts because the kids did not want to stay locked in. They felt that the school was not relevant anymore. So they wanted a relevant atmosphere and environment. They wanted an environment where they could be pieces and parts of it. They didn't want a traditional school where you come in the morning, stayed your 6 periods, and then left at the end of the day. They wanted school to be connected in some way with life. So a lot of SWS activities were school-centered and outside-centered. And also, every single kid, in a way, was building his own curriculum, so that each kid had a part in learning and studying what he or she wanted to do, which was very different from the main school where everything was fixed, department head, teachers, curriculum, courses, studies, you know, the whole business. SWS had to be born when it came, because if it hadn't, we would have lost, there would have been a massive dropout rate. We would have had kids transferring to private schools. We would have had families who would have gone to other places, who would not have sent their kids to us anymore. We would have lost 100 children. They would have simply gone to other places and other communities because we had remained the same as we had been for many, many years. The main school was, in the early 70s, exactly as the school was in the 50s. And I went there in the very early 50s. And there was no difference. In 20 years, everything remained the same. The departmental structure was the same. The class size was the same. The curriculum was the same. The library was the same. The texts were the same. Nothing had changed in the main school. Whereas the 100 were way ahead of that. They were already 20 years ahead with where the rest of the school was. And they were where the country was. They were where we were going politically at the time, and what was relevant outside was what was needed in the school. The main school had become irrelevant for a lot of children. In the beginning, when SWS had started, there was, as something which is new, there was searching and questioning and looking for ways that things would be, could be improved, trying to break down all old structures, but not build up a new structure. They didn't want another structure. They didn't want infrastructures and other structures and outer structures. They wanted it to be totally, totally loose. SWS, when we began, had meetings, and there was lots of talking and lots of discussion, and there was not a chair. They did not want a chairperson. So there would be, people would talk, it was like a friends meeting that you would speak if you had the mood or the spirit or the will or whatever you have at that moment. But if you have teenagers who have a set of goals, and faculty, some traditional and some non-traditional, who have goals, then they couldn't function. I mean, someone has to be, there's a wonderful Jewish word which I learned at the high school. I learned a lot of Hebrew words, Yiddish words. So there's a kochleffel. And a kochleffel is a spoon that always is stirring the pot, the agitator. You had to have a kochleffel, and we didn't have a kochleffel. So someone had to gradually, leadership had to emerge. Sometimes it would be a child, sometimes it would be a teacher, and sometimes it would be a little group of people. So that the democracy was right from the beginning, demos, people. I mean, that's what SWS was. And what we were trying to do was to get the people to get together And that was the hardest part. But after 3 months or 4 months of talking, then gradually there were compromises made by all parties concerned, and they agreed to a temporary leadership. The first leadership was not fixed. Nobody was appointed by the school committee, no extra money, because usually there's money that goes with being the administrator. They would rotate everything, so they rotated by the week. It was an interesting kind of eruption of democracy, but it was a true eruption of democracy. And they had to learn by doing what was going to function and what was not going to function. They wanted to be a just school. They had a sense of justice, which the other kids never enunciated or pronounced. They hated anything that was fixed and conservative. And so gradually, curriculum developed. Science, they agreed to come to us, and we let them do this. So it was kind of a birth that was spontaneous, fairly swift, short gestation period, and then this magnificent little SWS baby came. If I had to do a profile for you of what was the SWS kid like, the SWS kid was cussedly independent, creative, first and last and foremost creative, much more dynamic than the other kids, vocal, so vocal that sometimes one needed earpieces, very self-assured. They knew everything, even though they were only 15 and 16 and 17. And they worked their butts off. They were so enthusiastic that they would endless hours into whatever they were doing. So that kind of dynamism and that kind of motivation made for a community which was really very special. But there were people on the staff who were young people at the time. They must have been, 25, 28, and 30. Most of them idealists, politically very active. Sort of left, always left, not ever centered, never to the right, either in politics or philosophy or behavior or dress or anything. So quickly SWS developed into offbeat. The teachers looked a little bit like bag ladies. I always said they were my own private little bag ladies. And David, one of the faculty members, was a bag man. He was the original bag man. The kids also dressed as if they were from the other side of the river. They all looked like little mini Radcliffe types and Harvard types. The process that they use is one which is eclectic, non-authoritarian, loose, and they treat the youngsters as equal. There is no age barrier, and there's no professional level barrier. I'm teacher, you're student. And they always look at the kids and make them feel that whatever they're doing is okay. Sometimes it's a little bit ridiculous. Sometimes what the kids are doing is pure horseshit. And they really should say, that's really horseshit, you must not do that. But they would never do that. They'd say, the child has to discover when something is horseshit. When I come into a classroom, I come into the room, I say, good morning, everybody. Please take your places. And I expect them all to sit down, pay attention. I go to my chair or my seat. I never sit on it. I sit on the desk, and I want them to listen to me. I mean, they're going to get 50 minutes of pure Rinaldi, right? Hopefully giving them something that they know. They would never do that. They come into the room, they go to a place, people kind of come together. Someone will suddenly think, oh, yeah, she must be in charge. And so the whole interaction is non-directive. It's all very regular, non-authoritarian. SWS always had caring and concern. They were the most generous of spirit of any group that I've ever worked with, whether they were a religious group or not. They gave to every cause and everything. And the spirit of the teachers was the same way, open and expansive and concerned and caring. And the main school began to do the same thing.